my screen. I just want to make sure that the slides are up.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lily Mora. I'm a professional learning manager at Computer Science Teachers Association, and you're here today because you're here to attend one of our professional learning series events. This webinar is titled Outstanding Voices. It's our LGBTQ plus panel and Pride Month resource webinar, and we're so excited about our lineup today. So today is Wednesday, May 11, 2022, and we would love for you all to introduce yourself in the chat. Please include your name, your location, and your pronouns. So take a few seconds to do that so we can see who's in the room. And if you notice that there's someone who could be here right now and has the time, send them the link. Bring them over because it's going to be a great conversation. So we're hoping that more folks are going to have the opportunity to hear it live. But this is also going to be recorded for you all to view again later or to share with others. And hopefully we can even share maybe some of this with our students. So definitely spread the word, put it on Twitter, on your Insta, get folks over, send that link over to folks. All right, thank you all for introducing yourself. Just keep it coming. So I'm really honored to introduce our moderator. Megan Bowen has been an educational tech specialist for over 10 years and is currently the director of EdTech and computer science. And she's a computer science teacher at Salem Academy Charter School in Salem, Massachusetts. She also advises a ton of after-school clubs like the Makerspace Group, Robotics, and SAGO, which stands for Sexuality and Gender Alliance, right, Megan? And she's a member of the queer community, and Megan was accepted into the 2015 White House LGBTQ Tech and Innovation Summit to collaborate in identifying technology and computer science needs as they relate to the LGBTQ community, and was recently featured on Code.org's Equity in Computer Science Education video and in Education Week's article titled, "These Three Latina Teachers Are Pushing the Boundaries of Computer Science Class." We'll put those links in the chat for y'all to check out on your own time. But what Megan was also an Equity Fellow for Computer Science Teachers Association in the cohort that we were with last year. But she's also a good friend of mine. And so I'm really, really excited to introduce to everyone, Megan Bowen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lily. When you reached out to me to do this moderation, I was super excited because I didn't have to present my own stuff for once. So I get to rely on everyone else's collective knowledge and get to hear other voices, which is super exciting. So I'm hoping that today everyone we'll learn a lot from our panelists. I think what's really cool about this selection of panelists, these are people that are working in the fields, and sometimes I feel like as educators, there's this disconnect between people in the field and then our classrooms. And I think it's going to be really crucial, especially when it comes to like our LGBTQ students in computer science, and hearing from these folks about what their experience has been like. So hopefully you all will learn a lot from them. I know I'm going to. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can message me. I think I'm set as a host because I was letting people in. So feel free to message me directly if you wish to keep it anonymous. And I will put your questions in as we go. But we can go ahead and we can introduce our panelists. I am actually going to have you all introduce yourselves. Perfect. So we can just go right in order, and we can go ahead and start with Monica.
Hello, everyone. I'm Monica. I go by she and he, mix it up. I'm the founder of Maven Youth. We're a national nonprofit that focus on creating a safe space for LGBT youth to explore careers in tech. And so we do summer camps, we do workshops, we're kind of in the educational space of partnering with LGBT centers and a national level. So we bring coding into their programs by offering standalone workshops or bringing our camps. So a big segment of our community is queer youth, ages around 14 to 19. We do, some of our programs go up to transitional age youth to around 24. And then the other thing that we do aside from our queer youth is the partnering with LGBT centers. So our focus is really kind of to help uplift LGBT centers by inspire them to explore computer science and providing some kind of tech education in their centers. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your background, Monica. Hi, everybody. My name is Detrek Cooper. I am a Delivery Excellence Associate at SAP. I work in the realm of performance management, to where I am tasked with supporting our business technology platform, to where I really support our internal and external consultants and help them analyze their data in efforts to help prevent churn and create pipeline. In addition to that, I am also one of the global team leads for our Education and Awareness Work Group at Pride at SAP, in which we have the amazing opportunity to scale and help promote enablement of a lot of education and awareness resources within SAP, and also in very cool efforts of recruiting more individuals of the LGBTQ plus community to SAP. So that's just a little bit about myself.
Hey everybody, my name is Devon Johnson. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a product manager at Amazon. I lead our North America internship program and most recently our scholarship program. So some folks I've heard are users of our products and our offerings. So Amazon Future Engineer is a social impact program with the remit of increasing access in the BLNA, Black, Latinx, Native American, and women space in the computer science realm. So we do that through a variety of remits. The biggest that I own is a $40,000 scholarship and a guaranteed internship to Amazon. We also, in the K through 8 space, offer curriculum and other exploratory opportunities.
Thanks, Devon. Jenn, you're up.
You got it. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenn Weddel, and I work at Tanium. We are an endpoint management company in the cybersecurity realm, and I'm a project manager in sales enablement. So I teach salespeople how to sell. I started in tech enablement, and I've done leadership and professional development with the company, but I'm at heart a teacher. I started in K-12 and have taught everything in a very different ways, from second grade all the way up through university classes. So I love what I do. I made the transition from the classroom into teaching teachers how to teach online, and then into the corporate world about 3 years ago. So that's kind of most of what I do in the tech realm, but for fun, I partner with Disney and LucasArts, and I teach coding to kids through Star Wars.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenn.
Welcome.
Lily, I don't know if we need the slides necessarily, so if we want to just like get rid of them so that we can just see everyone's lovely faces a little bit better, we can do it that way. I just broke my chat, so I'll get that fixed in just a moment. But I want to go ahead and I want to start off with just like some basics of what brought you all to computer science, and how did you end up where you're at now? So what was kind of that like roadmap and path? I know everyone's paths to computer science can be very, very different. And so we can you can all take turns and share however much you feel like sharing in that realm of things.
Kind of kick us off. So mine was very unconventional. I had spent a lot of my early career, this is actually a career change for me. I started in HR. And so I had been in the manufacturing space. And so spent a lot of time supporting corporate employees. Then I moved into some of our engineering population in some facilities. And I knew that that wasn't for me. It wasn't, manufacturing isn't sexy, right? But like it needs to get done. And so I had always wanted to be at a large, complex matrix organization. And so I had just one day applied to Amazon. And I was just like, let's see, not expecting to hear anything back. And so 3 years later, here I am, and happy to talk a little bit more about my experience, but I'll kick it over to Detrek.
Thank you. So pretty similar to your story, Devon, this was indeed a career change for myself as well. Before transitioning into tech, I worked in the realm of special education as a special education instructor, as well as a dyslexia interventionist. During that time, I had the amazing opportunity to use data visualization tools such as Power BI, Excel, and Tableau to help drive data-driven instruction. And so that's where I really had my peak interest in data and how it could be manipulated to tell a story, but most importantly, how it could help drive and help us achieve outcomes. And so I took a few MIS courses, and within those MIS courses, I discovered SAP software. And to be quite honest with you, I was killing it in all of my assignments. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I love SAP. And so it's a very funny story. I was driving to go get like some dessert from the dessert gallery here in Houston. And I saw that there was an SAP office. I was like, and I quickly started to put the two together, and I just applied. Kind of like how Devon mentioned, I did not expect to get anything back. However, I was brought onto the team as an intern in sales operations, in which to where I leveraged my background in instructional design to help the sales team and produce deliverables, right? To help them see, okay, hey, this product area, we could help generate more sales here. Or hey, here, it looks like we're gonna lose these customers. And through networking, I ended up getting a permanent position here on the performance management team. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, not at all. Thank you.
Absolutely. And since we are popcorning, could I please, I know, look at that teacher strategy, right? Popcorning. I am going to popcorn Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. I have a very non-traditional. So when I was in the classroom, I always ended up being like the tech person, like nobody knows how to use the projector. Where's Jen? Where's Jen? My former partner is a computer programmer and has been since like they use punch cards to computer program. Like you've seen this in museums. Yeah. So just constantly listening to them, and I picked up tech, and then I rolled into teaching tech to teachers, and then I rolled into being a system administrator in IT, and I got my master's, and I was like, I'm an educator. I'm gonna get my master's in leadership, not in computer science. Super helpful, by the way. And then I was just at a point where I was like, I live in one of the most conservative states in the country, and I'm ready to do something a little more freeing. At the time, I was still married to a man. I was still straight presenting, and I just wanted a little more authentic experience. So I applied to companies that weren't in my state and ended up at Tanium, which was originally out of the Bay Area, and kind of fell head over heels in love with the company and cybersecurity. And all of a sudden it made sense to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. So, and then just all of that very authentic experience, I've been able to transition my former husband to my very best friend and kind of make that transition into being a very authentic version of myself through like computer science. And my coding skills are like really good for a second grader, but I love teaching it. So that's really all that matters.
Awesome, Jen. Thank you so much. I think, Monica, we have you left and how you ended up where you are now.
Right. So I have an unconventional path as well. My path was I was a youth worker working at LGBT centers. And so back in the day when things were quite different. And notice as the years go by working at in youth centers for queer youth, really the digital divide between a young person starting to become really tech savvy, and then how we were delivering services to LGBT youth. And so that's actually how Maven Youth got sparked, was trying to bridge that gap between our as a youth worker and counselors, right? And how do we reach LGBT youth? And so in that spread, hackathons were just on the verge of being created. So I did my first hack for queer youth, and then it just started going from there. Then it was like, how do we educate our queer youth to create those tech solutions? So instead of me trying to figure out with tech professionals how to build that bridge that gap between how we serve queer youth, I thought, well, as a traditional youth worker, allow the youth to create those tools. And how do we do that? We have to start with computer science. So we have to start with coding, the fundamentals of coding, so they can build the tools that they need to solve their own issues. And so it started from a youth worker to now, I teach Python and coding. I was not an educator in that sense, but then naturally just moved in that because there was a need for it. And now our nonprofit really is driven by LGBT youth. And so they are the educators. So they're the ones actually teaching our camps. So they come through our camps, they learn coding, game development, digital art, animation, and so forth. And then they are turn around and they become actually our educators for our programs.
Awesome. Thank you. It's so interesting that so many of you, as well as like myself, share a lot of similar like pathways into like computer science or like education as each other. It's always fascinating to hear everyone's stories. And they often have very similar threads through them. So with that being said, and some of your career backgrounds that you've shared and where you were and how you ended up here, I'm really curious about what your all's experience has been being an LGBTQ person in the computer science field, and what has that been like for you?
I'm going to kick this one off because this has been probably the biggest thing. When I came to Tanium and started working in the computer science area and working with programmers and all of these engineers and these brilliant, brilliant humans, the one thing I loved about working with these kinds of people is, especially in my age, in my 40s and above, these people are often set aside as they were growing up because they're different, because of their love of computers, how their brains sometimes work and grasp that mathematics and things like that. So me being a little bit different was totally fine. And the more different I became, the more authentic version of myself, the more accepting they were. And I felt very free inside this room, inside this group of engineers and computer scientists, and to just, nobody cared that my hair was blue. Nobody cared that I had a tattoo. Nobody cared. Like, they're like, oh, you're smart. You can do stuff and things. Teach me something. Like, deal. It was like very freeing because they also were accepting on that outlier growing up. So it has been the most amazing experience. And when I did finally come out and, told my wonderful humans at work, they were like, cool. Can you get me that thing by Tuesday? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, it absolutely wasn't a thing. They were like, we don't care. Like, that's great for you. Super. So it has been awesome.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that very much like transition. So I'm going to kind of combine two questions because not only like, what is it like being an LGBTQ person in the workplace, but also what is that coming out process like as like LGBTQ people in the world? We often, every time we transition through new jobs and workplaces, we have to like relive coming out over and over and over again. So just an additional part to that, like what has coming out been like for some of you, and what has been the response from employers and coworkers?
Absolutely. I will take that question. So I really like the idea of reliving the coming out process, because I think that for a lot of people, that is the reality, especially when transitioning and when we transitioning from out of a comfort place, right? Because as being a part of the community, we quickly find individuals who we feel can support us or that we can identify with. So sometimes leaving that safe place isn't always comfortable. However, from my experience, one thing I will say that I believe is very imperative is that when I apply for a role or when I'm in an interview, my sexual orientation is not indicative of whether or not if I could perform the job function at hand. And so it isn't something that I feel that I have to relive, because primarily I live it each and every day, and I'm going to show up as my best self. And that if you want me to be a part of the organization, you're going to hire me for my skill set and not my sexual orientation, you know? And if anything, I think the response is that has been very welcoming, because I feel that I add perspective. We all add perspective at our organizations when we step in and embrace our truth. And we also represent a bigger community. And I've been very fortunate to have that experience at SAP.
Thanks, Detrek. That's very, very nice to hear.
I think I'll jump in and come from the angle of the sense of going to tech companies, not working at a tech company because I work for a nonprofit, but for our summer camps, we're always every day we're at a new tech company, from a large campus company like a Google to a very small startup. So youth can be exposed to different types of sizes of tech companies. With that said, early on, you have, I felt like the industry before the whole movement of this D&I, inclusion initiatives that are starting to happen all over the place. Prior to that, they were just starting to hire those positions. So going into tech companies, I feel like the youth and I kind of experience more, they have a desire for inclusion, but they didn't know what that looked like. So yes, we had a volume of LGBT volunteers that worked at that tech company coming to our camps, sharing stories. But through that experience of having the youth ask them questions, even from, we'll have CEOs that will come in because they will, wow, a whole group of youth, let me go talk to them. And then the youth will do direct answer questions to them, like, why isn't there a gender neutral bathroom? Like, so when we go to camps, during our camp, those are the things I say when they host us is, do you have a gender neutral bathroom? If not, can you make one of your bathrooms gender neutral while we're there, right? And so we experience that, or they'll ask about, transition, does the tech company pay for transitional surgeries or hormone therapy? Like, they do these direct acts. And so through those journeys of every summer, we'll go to different tech companies. I feel like there was end up becoming these ahas, right? And so policy started to change. So the next year when we would come for the summer, the employer would be like, look at our gender neutral bathroom, right? And it's not that the tech companies didn't want to do it, they just didn't have a clue because no one was bringing it to the table. And so I feel there is this desire of wanting to do the inclusion, but we're not there yet, right? There's still that push and pull. For example, gender neutral bathroom. So if a tech company didn't have one and would put a sticker saying gender neutral bathroom for today, right? Then we would see or hear experience of employees pulling that sign down, right? Of not still understanding. So we could still do gender neutral bathrooms, but there still needs to be an education and awareness of all the employees, right? So it's not just meeting the needs of a queer person working at the industry, but how do we take it to the next level of really talking about inclusion, talking about awareness within the industry.
That's like really empowering to hear about kids just like throwing these questions at these like big, powerful adults. I like that just like image is just incredible. Kids are just amazing. And to ask questions about insurance and stuff, that's really neat to hear. Any other experiences? I don't know if Devon, you wanted to jump in on that one or.
Yeah, so when I first started out in the HR space, like manufacturing, it's been at organizations that have been very conservative. So imagine wearing a suit or like, business casual to work in those kinds of things. And so similar to Detrek, like I didn't come in talking about my sexuality, right? That has no indication of the education that I have or the experiences that I bring to the organization, and nor should, in my mind, that be front and center during our interview, right? And so that's kind of the approach that I've taken. If you ask me, I'll tell you, but the larger question I have is like, why are we talking about that in this talent management space, right? Like that would be my question. So it's more indicative of, I look at it, that's a bold question to ask, right? And so, so one of the pieces, when I came to Amazon, like, you know, I came in and I saw just a variety of different people. Like Amazon is very casual when you dress and do those. It was an adjustment for me, right? Like, and so seeing that we had, you know, like affinity groups such as Glamazon and, you know, Black Employee Network and Latinos at Amazon and things like that, it was quite refreshing. It allows you to come as you are. And I found myself being more willing to do different things. So, you know, having more, you know, facial hair and, you know, changing up your hairstyles, and also being comfortable talking about, you know, being out at work and doing those things, not thinking that folks are judging you or making assumptions about you or your performance when you're not in the room or behind your back. So it's been a very comforting experience here at Amazon, and also just, I mean, we have over 1 million employees. So like, it's a community, right? And so you feel that safe space and you feel like you have, you know, those that can relate to you as well. So that's kind of my experience.
Thanks, Devon. Yeah, that's a really, I think a really important point, that like having diverse people in computer science fields just makes it more welcoming for everyone. And I think that's just like a really important point to remember. So I kind of want to take it back to a little bit of what Monica was talking about, and just like industry thinking about what it's like to be inclusive. We know that like the computer science industry has often had this cultural identity that has really created a narrow image of who does computer science. And so I'm wondering, like, how does this culture within computer science impact LGBTQ folks? And as well as what maybe can be done to shift that culture. And I know, Monica, you mentioned like some of that education piece. So I'd love to hear more about like all of your thoughts around how do we just make computer science industry more inclusive spaces for everyone?
Okay, I'll start that one off as well. I really agreed with what Monica said earlier. I believe first and foremost, it's by spreading education and awareness, you know, and I believe that through that education and awareness, you're also able to represent so many different perspectives. I know at SAP, because I'm in SAP, the North America region, part of my role as the global team lead of our education and awareness work group is actually to shed light on what that's like for somebody who's at SAP Latin America or SAP, you know, in Central America, and it's just so many different places, you know, because everybody has a different experience. And I believe that just highlighting each one of those experiences also adds perspective. I think perspective is what truthfully contributes to, you know, that multicultural aspect that we really want to see in computer science.
I'll quickly follow that up. Like, I love like coming to Amazon, like seeing gender neutral bathrooms, seeing our benefits, right? Like looking at paternity leave and things of that nature, and like domestic partnerships and the benefits for you know, having surrogacy, or, you know, the child care benefits for LGBTQ couples. You know, seeing that support to me is like indicative of that inclusion in the tech space. But then also like, I lead an intern program. And so I think that's really important, like thinking about how do we include, how do we, from the point of application of applying to our scholarship, like through the internship and through like some of the development opportunities and wraparound support that we provide them, creating that space internally and externally, and being true to that is how we continue to create that that inclusion.
Yeah, I'm gonna tag on to that. So our company is very small. We started very small when I started. I think there were 400. I think we're barely over 2,000 at this point. So we have done a lot that is grassroots. We don't have a D&I team. We don't have, you know, big HR departments. So it is literally like those of us in the community that have found each other. And it's usually, we have a Slack channel called Ganium, and we just, that's our safe place. So we've kind of built that community, but it's creating opportunities to be able to ask questions. Like we're working with a couple universities to like kind of do university recruiting, internships, sales stuff. And we keep sending the same people to work with those universities, and they're wonderful humans and they're brilliant, and they fit the stereotypical definition of what computer science people look like. And just being able to ask and be like, hey, I'm qualified. Can I go? I don't look like a computer scientist. I don't act like a computer scientist, but I'm in the field. Let's get people comfortable. If we're doing a big expo and there's thousands of people in the room and we're running a booth, let me wear the Tanium brand and represent us. Being able to volunteer and step in and just having a safe place to ask those questions. So I tend to rock the boat a tiny bit just by asking questions, but it's never confrontational. It's like, have we considered? So it's a grassroots effort when you're at a smaller company and when you're at a place where you're kind of in a minority.
And Jennifer, I love that, like doubling down there. Like, I think whether large or small, like there's just some grassroots things and actions that we can take, right? Like being that like my team is very scrappy and it is very small. We're only 4 years old. And so it just grew to a 2-person team. And so now a 3-person team. And so like, we really had to get inventive and like, just almost lean into the human element, right? Like none of this should be rocket science to me. It's almost just thinking about like, I love this create opportunities for to ask questions, but then also like that representation piece is really important. Like one of the things that we have for our scholars that are oftentimes first generation and first generation college and also first generation corporate is a career mentor program. And like, it's important that I have representation from a variety of spaces, not just the tech space or the tech functional area, the software development, but like accounting and people that can relate to scholars in the LGBTQ space, in the people of color space, in the first gen space. So like, that's really important, and having that community. Like y'all will hear me talk about community a lot because I think that is what creates those opportunities as well.
So I'm listening to everyone and I'm a little stuck and I have like a lot of ideas and thoughts, and then some of it is shared with our panel, and then some of it's like pessimistic. And the challenge for me is I'm stuck because I think of such large tech companies that we've gone to, and how do you change that in a larger scale? And it is those intimate conversations. Like during our camps, when we're at tech companies, we do something called a campfire chat. And typically it is about the social impact of technology in LGBT lives. And so we become vulnerable with each other. And so some of the things are about that tech company and sharing data of their positive impact and negative impact. And then we talk about it, right? So we create this vulnerability of this conversation. And so I know the power of that. And then how do you do that large scale? How do you scale that up, right? And that's where I get stuck. I don't know how to do that. And then the other element that I think could be helpful is taking initiatives. So when tech companies take an initiative and take a stance within the community, our trans kids are being bulldozed right now, right? With all these legislations, all these, from school policies. I mean, we're being bulldozed right now. And what does it mean for a tech company to be more proactive in that versus being reactive to that, right? And what does it mean to show all this representation during Pride? Oh, you have Rainbow Pride with every logo. So when June comes, every tech company that I know is rainbowed out. But then when trans kids and policies are being in place, there's this discussion, there's this hesitation, there's this, do we get into politics or not? Where is our role, right? So that's where I get stuck. I don't know the answer to that. What I do know what works well is these intimate conversations of allowing people to be vulnerable. And that's very hard. And to allow allies or non-allies, people who want to be allies, but have a huge educational learning curve to how do we allow them to do those ouches out loud, right? To say stereotypical themes that they have in their mind, to say it out loud and not be punished, but be educated. And that is only creating these vulnerable conversations and more of a one-on-one or five, smaller groups to really see a shift in a larger scale. That's my insights in it.
Monica, I love that you said that. I just got off a call right before this. I'm rolling out like a training for any hiring manager and for our mentors that actually goes over this exact thing. So starting with small groups, having intimate conversations. Let's poke at whether we have biases based on gender, race, sexual orientation in a space that is safe. That's the foundation, right? And like, let's do some self-reflection. Like, how did we get here? Like, what gives us this, what is making us feel this way? But then also let's like give you a framework to reshape and reframe that thinking. And so that I definitely agree with.
So I want to definitely play off of some of the things that both Monica and Devon have said in these like vulnerable like conversations with people, and for people who aren't part of the community and what they need to do to step up. Being an ally like looks different in so many different contexts and different spaces. And like Monica said, a lot of people think it's just like putting the rainbow flag on something, which can be great. Like, yeah, like if I have a rainbow flag like out on my house and like people know like there's queer people in the room, and like putting it on my dorm in the classroom, like, yep, it's that like first thing. But like, just because you have the rainbow flag posted somewhere doesn't mean you're doing all of the steps necessary to really be inclusive. And really make LGBTQ people feel welcomed and included and like that they matter. So I'm curious what all of your thoughts are and ideas are around what does it look like to be an ally in the workplace and in computer science in general?
Can we poke at the word ally in this space? Like, can we unpack that? What do you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great question.
So, what I like to, so ally is used in a lot of spaces, right? So we use ally when it comes to like LGBTQ folks. We use it when we're talking about like people of color in the Black community. So we have different forms of being an ally. I've had different conversations with people who have also been like, I'm not like really like a fan of the word. And I'm definitely seeing a lot more of that because it does, I think, bring up for a lot of people in these communities this like passive idea of what allyship is. And it is just like posting like the rainbow flag or like the BLM like stickers or shirts and stuff like that. And it's not like actually active participation in like protecting people. So one of my favorite phrases that I've heard used instead of ally comes from Christy Crawford of New York City's Computer Science for All. And she uses the word co-conspirator instead of ally. So we can look at it that way. What does it look like to be a co-conspirator of LGBTQ people in the workplace to help change these bigger companies and what they look like and what their inclusion looks like?
For me, a few years ago, I saw something at Amazon where we had went on this like journey, and this is more of like the BLM space, the Black Lives Matter space, and so
it's all intersectional, so it's totally fine. It's all intersectional.
And so, but essentially, like I had saw things like we were trying to remove. There are certain terms, and in the CS environment. So you all might know some of them, like whitelist or like blacklist, and like we're trying to remove those, those kinds of things. in my eyes, I think it's really seeking to understand, thinking about who your audience is, and like really coming from a place of like genuine, being genuine, right? Like if you don't know and you have a question, ask the question. I'd rather you ask than make an assumption. That is a good way to be an ally or a co-conspirator, you know, like that, like really seeking to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I really want to, I'm sorry, did I?
Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. I really agree with you, Devon. I feel that in a term that we used when I was a special education teacher at Yes Prep, it's a quote by Ignacia Estrada, and it was, if students can't learn the way we teach, then maybe we should teach the way they learn. And so I want to root that back to the definition of allyship. I feel that in order to be an ally or to act as an ally for whatever it is that you want to support is to actually take the time out and understand the initiative. Because you can say, I might say, I have a very strong support system. However, I do appreciate the fact that they're supportive. However, if they do not understand what it is that I go through as being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, can you actually say that they're an ally? You know, so really rooting yourself in that education is in fact giving you the foundational knowledge that you need to act accordingly, and not just say, oh, hey, we need to create equal opportunity. Okay, well, okay, the conversation needs to be equal opportunity, and equality and equity are two completely different things, you know? So actually understanding what the need is, identifying the need, and creating the action steps towards it.
Yeah, at my company, I was like out maybe like 7 seconds, and I was like, "What are we doing for Pride? That's so good." They were like, I don't know, we've never done anything for Pride." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll figure it out. Is that cool? Then am I gonna get in trouble?" And they're like, "No, go forth and do stuff." So then after the first one this year, I contacted, you know, "Hey, I want to do stuff this year." And they're like, "Oh, we've got a whole initiative, whole thing going on." And I was like, "Huh, weird. Like we haven't heard anything on the Ganium channel." Like, and that's when I had to sit down and have a conversation that just basically came down to nothing about us without us. And that kind of became our motto. And that's actually something we started integrating: nothing about us without us. And we have those conversations. And one of the things I really embraced when I was going through leadership training was going to your place of wonder instead of like, what's going on? Why are we doing this? What's happening? You know, why, you know, like I teach people, go to your place of wonder. If you're questioning something, if you're questioning how my experience is, just sit in wonder for just a second. I wonder what it's like to have that experience. I wonder how they come to work. I wonder what they struggle with. I wonder what they celebrate, and sit in that place of wonder and then be willing to have the conversation.
Absolutely. And I really love that term, nothing about us without us. I really love what that speaks to, because I feel that oftentimes, especially, it's always, well, hey, I support you being gay. Is that not enough? Or hey, I support you being a woman. Is that not enough? Because I feel that when we limit the conversations to there, it quickly turns into, oh, hey, well, you can be gay, but don't be too gay. Or or like, hey, you could be like a woman, but it can't be a feminist, right? Or whatever that is. And so I feel that, like you just said, I feel that you do not have to necessarily identify with the same identity as another individual to know what it's like to have a struggle, to know what it's like to actually go through something. And to tie that back to what you're saying is that before you try to make those action steps, or before you try to support, know what you're supporting. You know, it's very hard, and I have a very difficult time of wrapping my mind around when someone makes a decision for you and did not have that conversation with you. You know, so it's at that, because at that point it's the question. At that point is the question, is the support in response to me, or is it to support your belief that you think that you're an ally, you know? So I really like that term, nothing about us without us.
Thanks, everyone. That was like super awesome. I really love all those thoughts and ideas. Thanks, Lily, for like writing them all down there. I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording, because Detrek, you like laid out this beautiful plan of like how to be an ally, which should just be like written up and everything. So I want to shift some focus. I've so appreciated your experiences in the industry, but a lot of you come from like a place of education. So I want to talk about like education world for a little bit, because we only have 15 minutes left, which is wild. I'm curious about what your all's experience, and from what I've gathered, I don't think it's much, but what is your all's experience from like elementary, middle, high school with computer science? And is there anything that you wish an adult would have done to get you interested in computer science sooner?
I wish somebody had told me that girls can do it, because I was repeatedly told girls could not. Like, can we just say like, thank you, sorry, like somebody just be like, you're not bad at math, you can do this. That's all I needed to hear, and I probably would have run with it for my entire life.
And I was going to add on to that, exposure. I think like exposure, especially if you are first gen or from underserved and marginalized communities, like that is the foundation, exposure.
I want to say resources, because from all of the schools that I've attended and all of the schools that I've taught at, I do not feel that the resources were there. However, I do feel that the resources were according to the times, And so I think considering that computer science is a realm that's actively growing, I just think that promoting education itself, taking the time out to learn more about it outside of the classroom setting. When we think about some of our great innovators like Jack Dorsey or some of the other awesome people who well, maybe not anyways, but some of the other founders of these companies, is that they took the time out to learn outside of the classroom. And so I wish that it was emphasized to me early on, especially if it was in computer science, to say, hey, well, although we may not have this to provide in the classroom, these resources are still out there. So I think just directing me to those resources, or any of our other students to those resources.
One thing, could I add onto that? I would say
Absolutely.
Also like speaking in like layman's terms, because when I hear computer science, I feel like that's overwhelming. I think of SDE, like software development engineering or something like that. But I'm in tech, and I'm not a computer science, I'm not an SDE, right? And so I think exposing to just beyond that notion, that linear path of like, that is the only way that you can get into tech, also puts into perspective, and it meets people where they are, especially if you haven't had any sort of context around computer science or tech in itself. And so we already have these stigmas: math is hard, science is hard, those types of spaces. And so think about what that looks like when you're having those conversations with students at an early age.
That computer science can be a hobby. It doesn't have to be a career. Like, it can be wicked fun. Like, it's like such a great brain game, or like music or playing soccer. Like, it can be just as fun as anything else that you do. So even if it's not something you do in the classroom, you can do it for funsies. Tons of materials, code.org, all the stuff I do with Disney. Mm-hmm. It's fun. It doesn't have to be a career. It can just be for funsies.
And think about those people, we talk about inclusiveness, right? Like think about those people that are self-taught learners. Yep. What about those folks? Like, do we have to go to school to get a degree, like in order to be considered a valid in the community, like an expert in the community and things like that? So I mentioned at point of application, right? Like that's mm-hmm. what, when we talk about true inclusiveness, like thinking about those things.
Yeah, Devon, I want to jump into that because that's where I go to, is because of the youth that I work are predominantly Black and brown youth, queer youth, and they're under resourced, right? They're in schools that don't have a computer science program, right? And then if you think of after school programs, who's doing that work, right? And so that's why we try to inspire LGBT centers to do it. But anywho, so what is the non-traditional way of getting into computer science? So I think of what I would have wanted was thinking that I don't have to go to college, right? I could go to boot camp, I can be self-taught, right? What are the non-traditional ways? But then it bottlenecks. So let's say you do go to boot camp or you self-taught yourself through YouTube, right? And get that education in computer science. We still, at this day, the tech companies are hiring, their interns have to be juniors or seniors in a college or universities. So until we change that framework of like, no, you do not have to be enrolled in a university or college, that there's these other non-traditional ways of coming into and being an intern at our tech company that allows us to now start seeing ourselves in it. Because there can just be a limitation of, we have this uphill battle of who's in tech, right? There's an image of what that person is. And then when you go in the industry, typically that is the image, what you thought typically you're going to meet, right? And be surrounded in that. So then how do we break that, right? How do we provide different pathways that are not just this traditional pathway? And I go back to allyship. Like if you're to be an ally, I was thinking, because everybody addressed being an ally to the queer community, but I was thinking about how do you be an ally to computer science? Like how do you bring people into the fold when computer science, just saying that alone is so intimidating, right? It is such an intimidating statement to say, hey, go into this. And I would hope, like Jenn is saying, that we can make it more fun and exciting. Let's do video games, let's do this, let's do that. And I think that's starting to happen now, but definitely I feel like that we're just emerging into being computer science fun and not this intimidating, structured, a certain way of how we do it.
And I could, because you mentioned something that was interesting to me about that. Again, it's going back into that traditional path of like, you need to be a junior and doing those kinds of things. Like I'm seeing a shift in that thinking because there's going to be a talent shortage, right? Like I think there was some research that's like by 2026, we're going to be short X amount or percentage of folks in the STEM space. And so we are going to be forced to start to think about what that looks like. Some organizations are moving to that, like thinking about those, community colleges, thinking about building out a pipeline and partnerships with local community colleges to bring people on and taking more chances there. Like Amazon Future Engineer, these students are coming in as freshmen. Coming to Amazon as freshmen. So like we're starting to, it's that access piece, the equity piece, and then the equality piece, and then inclusiveness as the foundation.
Well, and one thing I want to point out is that where we're at, where we're like, oh, you have to have a degree in computer science, like that's a pendulum shift, because there was a time where if you knew how to like run the green screen, like that's all you needed to know, man. Like you were a programmer. Like get a bunch of like my ex, like he literally taught like 18 people, and most of our friends are in computer science, and not a single one of them have a degree in computer science, because it was like old school ghetto, like go play D&D and then sit in front of a computer and learn how to code, like Ruby on Rails, old school stuff, so it's a pendulum shift, and we've gotten into this like, oh, it's such a serious topic and it's so difficult, and now we're like, oh wait, kindergartners can do this, maybe we're going to be okay. Like it'll shift back and forth. But if we're talking about allyship, let's get those old like non-educated like badasses that know how to program, let's get them talking to people and youth, and these people like, dude, I did it without a college education and it was awesome. Like they have that enthusiasm from back in the day, trust me.
110%. And somebody who I think of, especially in this conversation, this individual, he's a director at Schlumberger, and his degree is in history. He taught himself data science through watching YouTube videos, you know? And so I'm also like, hey, YouTube and these social media websites are not always a bad, you know, reference point. It just depends on how you leverage it. So yeah, 110%. I do not think that you have to have a formal education in computer science. Like look at all of us, you know, and we're here, and computer science is such a spectrum, you know, just the same way as healthcare is a spectrum. You know, it's all of the different positions that contribute to that umbrella. But absolutely.
So we're at like 5 minutes and you have all shared some super awesome ideas. I want to end kind of with one last question. It's a tough question, but I think it's an important one, especially with all the educators here who are like, how do I now support my LGBTQ students in my computer science classroom? So my question is, what advice can you give teachers who want to make their computer science classrooms a more welcoming place for LGBTQ students? But also, how can these teachers support these students in a don't say gay world that we're living in right now?
I have this conversation often. Like I had a teacher ask me about very similar, like a Black student. How do I get this student from Africa to be interested in computer science? And I was like, well, let's unpack that, right? So like, why is it different, right? Like the short answer to the question, Megan, is like exposure, like what Jennifer said. Like we all know that computer science has historically been a male-dominated field. That is a small action step that you can take, is exposing and encouraging young ladies, young girls to explore technology, whether it's computer science, whether it's, you know, non-tech, tech roles in the tech space. Like computer science, I think someone said nothing about us without us. Like, and ask them the question, like, you know, what does this look like for you? How can I best support you in this CS space? Jennifer, I think you had something to add to that.
Yeah, so my advice would be to just live authentically yourself, whatever that means. Like, yeah, so I fit into like a couple of I could be a token in a couple of groups, like that's cool. Everybody has a thing, but if as a teacher, you're able to provide that authenticity of who you are and, you know, a safe space to be yourself and encourage a safe space for them to be themselves, that's really important. And you don't have to say anything about anything. Just let people be who they are and encourage them to embrace their own authentic journeys.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to take it from a perspective of pedagogy. I'm all about differentiation of instruction, you know, and creating a UDL, universal design learning, you know, environment that reaches all learners in a classroom, you know, because I'm also a huge advocate of ableism. What about our individuals in the classroom that are part of the LGBTQ community and that are not, you know, I'm not going to say able-bodied because I hate that term, because everybody's capable of doing something. We all have different needs in learning. However, I just say using that differentiation of instruction, finding ways in which that you can leverage technology within learning, because they're not different. A lot of the times we just don't know the application, trying to apply the knowledge and application, you know, together. And as far as creating an inclusive learning environment, as everyone said, foster everyone's individuality. You know, one thing that I always told my students and would tell my teachers too, who I worked with all the time, life is so much bigger outside of the classroom in this little small community, whether or not, and it doesn't even have to just be limited to somebody in the queer community, whether or not, if whatever your religious background is, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, that is irrelevant to the fact that you have something to offer. So just fostering those voices.
Monica, you want to close us out with a final thought?
Oh, I feel the pressure. Well, first of all, there's a lot of educators. You probably know better than us to offer some suggestions. But the first couple of things that come to mind is creating a safe space. And we talked about the stickers and all that. That goes a long way still. At this day and age, youth are looking for, and it could be, you're highlighting the creator of computer science, right? You're highlighting the first female queer astronaut that has gone out, right? All those posters and all those images, queer youth see that. They see it, they spot it, and then all of a sudden they feel like that's a safe space in it, right? Go to the pride clubs, go to see if there's a GSA or a Spectrum Club or a Pride Club and say, hey, I want to come in and talk about LGBT characters in video games, right? And so you're having this conversation of all these stereotypes and these harming images of LGBT identities in video games. You could talk about that and then all of a sudden say, hey, why don't we create a video game that is LGBT, right? And so come to my class, right? There's so many cool, innovative ways that you can do, and you're probably doing it already. But don't lose sight. Like, you can read books, you can educate yourself, but those, believe it or not, a queer person could spot a rainbow little tiny sticker in a classroom that's covered with everything else. So those are just as important as your language and how you talk, being inclusive of pronouns, right? All of that goes such a long way of creating a space of being inviting for LGBTQ to come into your classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as per usual, if you come to one of my talks, we are over on time. But I super appreciate all of you who showed up today to listen to all of our wonderful panelists. I super appreciate all of your thoughts and ideas. It's so nice to get into a virtual room with people who have similar ideas and thoughts on LGBTQ youth and intersectionality. So I think with that, I'm turning it back over to Lily to close us out with a couple little announcements.
Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you to Jenn, Devon, Detrek, and Monica. This was such a rich conversation. I swear there are so many nuggets of wisdom that I feel like just from this 1 hour conversation that we could create like stickers and posters of inspirational words to put in an entire school. I swear, I mean, if you just go back and scroll, you'll see like, oh my gosh, I need to print that. Oh my gosh, I need to print those. That could be a project. So thank you to Megan, who did just such an amazing job with curating this conversation with you all. For those of you who are interested in the chat, you'll see a link to a slide deck that does have some resources for you if you are looking for things to be able to celebrate Pride Month with your students. There is a section on LGBTQ plus tech groups. We have CS heroes that you could feature. Some of these are just articles with lists of names and some of their accomplishments. The very last one was shared by Emily Thorford, who's attending right now. She collected some CS hero Pride posters to celebrate Pride Month. And so it's already in a slide deck that you could print out or feature with your students. We also have articles. One of them is actually was written by Megan. It's LGBTQ plus History Month, an informal exploration on the history of LGBTQ plus CS education. Definitely worth checking out. And then some resources on how to celebrate at work with other educators and in your classroom. So take a look at that. Lastly, we wanted to direct you to our survey. By filling it out, you will provide us feedback and also receive a certificate of completion. We are wrapping up this school year, and CSTA does have a few events you might want to consider. We have an Engage, which is our monthly event where we are going to feature what to expect at the upcoming conference. We hope you can check that out. And then our very last professional learning series event is our Code and Play, where folks can come out and collaborate and learn a new platform or something you want to learn more about so that you could test it out before you implement it with your students. So it's really a time to have fun with coding. And our annual conference is July 14th to 17th. We do hope you make it. It's in person. OMG. So yeah, we have one more event that's gonna wrap up our PLS, and then we will restart it in the fall. But we are so glad that you could all be here today. This was so amazing. We will process this video and have that available for you all so that you can revisit or maybe even consider playing it for your sections of it for your students, so you can have conversations and really have these opportunities for students to ask questions and allow themselves to be vulnerable. But we hope you are all considering all the different ways that from the conversation that we listened to today, how can we be more inclusive so that all students can feel like they can learn computer science and they can simply enjoy it. So thank you all, everyone. What an amazing event. We hope you have a great week. Thank you. And happy Pride Month in June, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, you guys are so amazing.
Yes,
After I log off, I'm gonna run around the house and just scream by myself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Weird, right? Thank you all so much for
Thank you all so much.
You all are amazing. It's so nice. Sometimes I feel like I'm like the only LGBTQ person talking about LGBTQ people in computer science. So it's nice to be in a room with people who like get it and like are on the same page. So I super appreciate you all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Likewise. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.